Sadly, there are no CTO awards. I'm sure it'd be quite a different crowd. I thought you were referring to my height. I thought that's where you were going with that joke. Biggest CTO height. You sort of went a different way there. But yeah, I'm the chief engineer at REA. I'm essentially the CTO. It's a bit of a weird title. There's a history behind it. I won't go into it. Look, what I wanted to talk to you about today is there's a lot of companies that when they get to a certain scale that are trying to figure out how to maintain the speed that they had when they were little, and by doing that at scale. And the story I want to share with you today is how we're doing that internally and how this idea of an internal platform is playing into that story. Hopefully I'll give you a few takeaways that you can take back to your office and try at home as well. So just very briefly, and Simon started with that already, but REA Group, I think you know us mostly from realestate.com.au. That's our hero brand in Australia. You may not know, actually, we have a bunch of other brands in Australia as well, around property, around financial services, around data as well. We just acquired a data company. We have some brands in Southeast Asia as well, so we're in five countries in Southeast Asia, and we have some investments in India and in the US as well. So really a global company, and it's really a Melbourne startup story. It's been going for 20 years, and it's been massive growth, and the platform story is intertwined with that growth. Just to give you some of the key stats, we were a $12 billion company. We're a $10 billion company now. The share price has tanked the last few weeks. That's what happens when you're publicly listed. That's okay. We have around about 1,700 employees in Australia and contractors, so quite a big organisation. About 650 of those are in technology, and another 100 in product and UX. So quite a large kind of product development DNA. And roughly speaking, just to throw another stat out there, we have about 1,000 systems in our systems catalog. So these are code bases, microservices, assets that we build and run in production. So kind of quite a scaled organisation. At the heart of what we do, we're a product development organisation. So we build amazing experiences around property for our consumers. That creates a very highly engaged audience. Those people come to our site, they love our site. That's very valuable to our customers who want to put properties and advertising products in front of those people. And it's a beautiful kind of business model that has been very successful for us. And fundamentally, product development is a team sport. So we're an agile organisation. We think about building squads. Ideally, we want to build squads that are very close to the customer. We want to build squads that have a very clear mission in serving their customer. We want to have cross-functional teams that have all the kind of skills and resources they need to be able to serve their customer. And we want them to be autonomous as much as possible in making decisions and owning that. And actually, you'll see a lot of similarities between what the previous speaker spoke about around Netflix. And Netflix is a company that we kind of look up to for inspiration a little bit as well. So the way this plays out in practice, so when we talk about proximity to the customer, we have a line of business structure, for example. So that means actually most of the engineering teams, those 650 people that I spoke about before, don't actually report centrally to a technology team. They report into the business, close to the customer, solving problems for the customer segment. That's really challenging from a technology point of view because we have a very distributed organisation. At a squad level, we have a lot of autonomy, so teams can make decisions around their technology, and similar to the previous talk, with that responsibility comes, with that choice comes a lot of responsibility. So we do DevOps, and teams carry their own pages. So they can make their choices, but when things go bust, they suffer the consequences as well. But autonomy, I'd say, is a very valuable cultural trait in our organisation, something that we value very importantly, and we think it's one of the ways that we've been able to scale product engineering to the point that we have. But when you lift the hood into what's happening in these squads, there are a lot of common concerns that these squads have to solve for. And some of those concerns are around low-level infrastructure things. So, for example, how to build code, where to run code, how to deploy code, source control, those kind of things. We have a bunch of stuff that is more at the middle layer, so APIs and data. How do you discover data? How do you measure APIs? How do you scale APIs, for example? And we have a bunch of things that are more at the user experience level. So, for example, managing user identity or analytics or user experiences. So there's a bunch of cross-cutting concerns that every single squad has to deal with in some way, shape, or form. When you're a small startup, these concerns kind of not really front of mind. You're doing the bare minimum you can to get by. Your primary job as a startup is to find product market fit. So these things don't really matter. You're kind of doing the minimum. But when you start scaling up, now you have multiple autonomous squads. These choices start to become more important because when you have autonomy in squads, sometimes they choose the same things, but sometimes they choose divergent things. And over time, those diverging things start to hurt because that's quite often that divergence is not really adding value to your business. So this is the challenge. Autonomous teams making different choices creates technology divergence if you don't do something to manage it in some way. When you start getting really big, this is a really big problem because now you've got different factions between teams. You've got different attitudes to solution A or solution B or solution C for a problem. And if left unmanaged, can be a serious drain on productivity. So this is the big challenge, and this is where the platform conversation starts for us. But as technology leaders, we don't let it get to that point. And the job of a CTO is to manage the whole technology footprint. So well before it gets to that point, we start thinking about how to extract commonality from those systems. And there are lots of ways to do this, but the question for us in our environment is how to get economies of scale as we scale up, but do that in a way that is not eroding the autonomy that we really value in our teams. There's an operational warning here. So traditionally, I think maybe 10 or 15 years ago, if you're a traditional organization, the way you would do this is extract the layers out. So you would say, well, that lower layer, that's an infrastructure team. We'll put an ops team in the center and build a dependence on the ops team. I think we've learned over time that's not the right way to scale product organizations. That creates choke points and dependencies that actually can be an inhibitor to productivity. So this is not a talk about DevOps. I'll just assume that's kind of we've all learned that already, and that's not the way to go for us at least. So this is a problem we were struggling with at REA. We were making, like all other companies, lots of investments in our platform. And I'm of the belief that as you make investments in your platform grows in breadth and scale, and over time, you should actually be speeding up because the waterline of the platform rises, a lot of the common problems are solved, and then the job of a product team gets easier because they have more capability to lean on, and therefore we should be getting faster in getting products to market. But instead, we felt like we were getting slower. We felt like over time we're actually grinding to a slower cadence. And this came up in different forums by different people and different stakeholders. From product, why does it take so long to get things out? Even for engineers, getting to the point where, feeling like they're reinventing wheels that didn't need to be reinvented. So we wanted to dig a bit more into this challenge. And when we actually looked at our platform maturity, one of the insights we had was that actually the area we were making the most investment was the area where our platform was the least mature. So I mentioned before that we have a distributed organization where technology sits close to the customer. So actually the majority of our resources are actually deployed in our lines of businesses close to the customer. But that's the area of our business where we're getting the least reuse. So that's really interesting. At the lower levels of the stack, where we have a more deliberate investment and more teams that are dedicated to that, we were doing better. But that was a small percentage of our investment. So the real question is, why is reuse so hard? And actually the insight for us is that it's actually really, really hard for a team whose primary focus is to build something for a customer, for an external customer, to at the same time deliver a platform outcome. They're very, very different things. Teams start with the right intent. So they'll start a project or a product and they'll say, well, that's a common need and we'll build an API or we'll build it in a common way or we'll build a library. And as a byproduct of our primary mission, we'll build a platform. But actually, even though the intent is there, that never kind of pans out that way because when push comes to shove, projects slip or priorities change or scope increases, the secondary outcome, which is the platform outcome, gets deprioritized. So that's a big challenge. And actually, interestingly, it's very easy for the team to make the decision because the impact of that decision is actually not borne by that team. The impact is borne by the team that's coming behind them that maybe could have used that API, could have used that platform, that now no longer exists or doesn't exist and they have to build themselves. So it's really hard to get teams that are focused on products to also build platforms. Just really, really hard. It's not all bad news. When we looked internally, we had lots of examples where we were getting a good platform outcome. This is one example. So there's a product called Shipper, which is an internal deployment tool, Dockerization tool. And in this example, this is an adoption curve. So you can see that over time, There are hundreds of code bases and systems that have adopted this tool. And this is actually a very compelling graph, right? So I can show this to my CFO, and I can say every time a team has used this tool is a time where they didn't have to do some work, so we save some money. And I can show that over time we can advance this tool and make changes and keep everybody in lockstep. So there's a lower cost of maintenance overall. So a very, very compelling story here. When we looked at successful examples and we dug under the hood, we found some common themes of what made these things successful. So first of all, they solved the real problem that we had at scale. So a problem that lots of teams had right now that we could do a better job on. Secondly, we had a strong visionary, somebody that really understood the problem, had a vision for what the solution would be, was passionate to get it done, and was kind of driving that conversation through the organisation. Thirdly, we had committed ongoing investment. So a team whose job it was, who had time and capacity, not as their secondary job, but as their primary job to do these things. And these people spent their time building great user support, building great documentation, even creating training. So one of the insights we had is that a really good way to get adoption of the things you want to get adopted is to provide great training internally and make it easier for people to learn. But actually, the aha moment for us is when you stand back from all this, this is actually product management. So these are the attributes that make our external product successful as well, or making our internal platform successful as well. So that was a bit of an aha moment and kind of the core idea of my talk, which is that when you apply product thinking to your internal platform, it unlocks a whole new way of thinking about the product. And this is the approach we're taking. We're really thinking about our internal platform as a product in the same way that we think about our external products. So this word platform is really a problem. I think I'm talking to a room that understands this problem. The word platform really means a lot of different things to different people. When I talked about platforms, I was trying to have a conversation with the organisation about scaling out engineering, getting economies of scale, getting reuse, those kind of things. But I could tell when I was speaking to people about using the word platform, everyone has a different mental model for what that is. And everything's a platform these days. Facebook's a platform, Android's a platform, AWS is a platform, Salesforce is a platform. Even our website, some people think is a platform. It's a platform for connecting buyers and sellers of property. So this word wasn't really quite cutting it. I could tell that we were talking about different things and the points weren't quite landing because we weren't actually talking about the same thing. So taking a product approach to this, what's the solution? Well, actually, products really have a strong brand. So when you have a product, you have a brand that very easily represents what that brand stands for and what it means. So what we wanted to do is create an internal brand for our internal platform. So we engaged the marketing team, we spoke to professionals, we got a logo designed, we came up with some ideas, and we came up with this brand called Colab. It's a made-up word, but we made this word mean what we wanted it to mean to have the right conversation in the organisation and drive that culture change. And then we put it everywhere. We printed T-shirts, we put it on conference talks, we put it on intranet, we plastered it everywhere. And the brand's really extensible, right? So within the brand, we have a bunch of products, and these are products that are associated with that brand. And very easily, you can tell when you see one of these icons that they're all part of the same thing. It's very easy to kind of associate the components of the brand with the values of the brand. So what does the brand stand for? A little bit like the Heart Foundation tick, we wanted the brand to stand for something, to be instantly recognisable for what it is. And for us, it was these things. So first of all, there's a bunch of criteria, and there's some acceptance criteria as well. So these are the things that must be true in order for a thing to be considered a candidate to be part of the Colab brand. First of all, it has to have immediate benefit for many teams right now. This is not a future need, this is a need we have right now. It has to be a well understood problem. This is not about experimenting, it's about the things we're doing at scale poorly and doing it better. It has to be a generic building block, so something that we can build lots of other things in lots of other contexts. It has to be something big enough to take a considerable amount of effort to build so that no individual team can build it as a byproduct of the day-to-day work. And it has to be something that can be reasoned and developed independently. So if those things are true, then it can be considered to be part of the brand. And then in order to then make it and be accepted as part of the brand, these things have to be in place. It has to have a product manager whose primary job it is to develop and evolve this thing. It has to have a team, a custodian, who has capacity and resources to be able to advance it, support it, and take it forward. And there has to be a destination, a place where I can go and find out more information, get support, engage with the team. So my second tip is to use brands and icons to tell the platform story. This has been a very powerful way to get the whole organization talking about the same thing. Even to the point where one of the proudest moments was when our CEO at our global conference back in July, on an opening keynote, this is one of the two or three key messages was, let's build it smarter, and using the Colab brand as a vehicle for landing that message. So now we've got the whole organization talking about the same thing, which is really, really important. Okay, as we were having this platform discussion, we were facing a lot of resistance in some areas. There was some ghosts in the past where we had made efforts in the past to get a platform outcome, and somehow that hadn't really delivered. So we're really keen to understand what the failures of the past had told us in terms of lessons. And one of the things we found a common thread where a lot of those areas where we'd failed to deliver a platform outcome in the past was a case where we tried to predict a future need. So the conversation went a little bit like this. We see a market trend or a need that's going to show up in the next 6 to 12 months, put a team together to build that ahead of demand. By the time we actually have the need, we'll be ahead of the curve because we would have built it already. The truth is it doesn't really work because by the time it takes 6, 9, 12 months to assemble a team, build it, get it done, the original need for that thing has moved on. The team that originally needed it has found a different way to do it. The thing you predicted would be a need has probably changed over time. You actually don't know enough about the problem to really predict what the outcome should be. And the result is, well, no, we built it, but no one came. So we had examples where that was the case, and we never got the platform outcome as a result. So applying product thinking to this, what's the insight? So the insight is think about the product lifecycle. So all products have a lifecycle. And the first stage of the lifecycle is exploration. So exploration is what you want to do when you actually don't know what you're doing, you don't have experience. And in this case, if this is the area you're exploring, you probably don't want to platform at this stage. You actually want to encourage divergence, exploration, learning. The transition between exploration and exploitation is probably the most important thing because the conditions you need in place to explore are very different to the conditions you need in place to exploit. So to exploit, you need all the things I spoke about in the previous slide. You need a dedicated resource, a product manager, all those things. And we certainly had examples where we failed in that transition in either direction, and a lot of our failed platform efforts kind of the root causes down to that. And then the long tail of the life cycle is important as well. So once your initial investment in the platform is kind of winding down, how do you maintain it, have enough ongoing capacity to be able to support it? And then eventually, how do you retire it? If you've picked something new or a better way, how do you help people move to the next stage? So think about the product life cycle of your internal product as well. So actually interesting, so Netflix has coined this path, this term, which is like pave the path. I really like it because it really illustrates the way that you should extract a platform. So the idea behind this, and I'm sure you've heard it, is that the way to figure out what your platform should be is to look at what your teams are already doing and just make it easy to do those things. So pave the path. Engineers are lazy in a good way. If you make it easy to do the thing you want them to do, then they'll generally kind of follow that direction. And by the way, if they want to choose a different path, that's okay as well. They have the autonomy to choose a different path. That comes with some responsibilities and some downsides, but teams should still be autonomous in choosing a different path if the path you've paved for them doesn't solve the problem they have. So my third tip is to don't resist the temptation to predict the platform. Instead, harvest the platform. Look at the things you're doing a poor job of and consolidate those things because they're the things that are going to give you the best return on investment. So harvest the platform and pave the path. Okay, so one of the things I've been thinking a lot about in this journey is this trade-off between autonomy and leverage. And I actually may have done a talk at one of these conferences. I don't know if it was the first one or the second one, Simon, but where I spoke about this topic. So what I thought was at the time is we really value autonomy, and autonomy is really valuable for all the reasons I described before. But over time, if we want more consistency and more kind of sharing and reuse, we're going to have to take away some of that autonomy in order to get the leverage outcome that we want. But actually, when you think about your internal platform as a product, it leads you to think about two different types of teams. So first of all, you have the set of teams that are product teams. Their primary job is to serve the market, serve your customers, build products for your external customers, drive revenue, those kind of things. But then you also have your internal platform teams. Their primary job is to drive leverage. And actually, the product teams are the customers of your internal platform teams. And it's interesting because there's an interesting dynamic. They still have a customer. It's a different kind of customer. It's not an external customer. It's not a real estate agent or a property seeker. But it's actually the squads themselves and the people in your organization that are using those products. But really importantly, both of these teams are autonomous. And both of those teams have customers. And both of those teams should be able to make decisions in the best interest of their customers. So if you set it up the right way, you're not really undermining the autonomy of either one of those squads, those types of squads. When you scale this up to an organizational model, you end up with something like this, which is like a bunch of teams whose job it is to serve the market, build things for your external customers, and then a bunch of teams that are platform teams that are building for your internal customers. Now, one of the questions I get a lot is, what's the right ratio? Like, what's the right investment level on either one of these things? I think the answer depends, and it depends a lot on your context. For organizations like us, at the scale we're at, I'm finding that about between 20 and 35% is kind of the range where organizations are landing. And that's about where we're at in terms of our investment as well. So my fourth tip is to try and organize for autonomy and leverage. Don't think of these things as trade-offs. And there are ways, if you think about your internal platform as a product, that you can have both autonomy and leverage in every part of your organization. Okay, so how do you measure success for these teams? So you have product teams and platform teams, and they've got different customer types, internal and external, and they have different primary drivers, which are either revenue or market outcome and leverage. But actually, the success metrics for these teams should be quite similar. There should be customer outcomes. They have different customer types, but the customer outcomes are the same. So when I talk to our internal platform teams, I ask questions around adoption. How many customers have you got? How much are they using your product? I talk about service levels. How many issues do you have every week? How quickly can you respond to issues? I ask them about customer satisfaction. Do you have a net promoter score? Do you survey your customers? What are your customers saying about your product? And I ask them about performance. So is your product meeting the SLAs that you've promised to your customers? And these are customer metrics, right? So the other metrics around, are you efficient? Are you delivering fast? How's your team working? They're important as well. But this is the actual customer outcome that we want to hold teams accountable to. Now, to achieve those outcomes, you have to think about professional services. If you imagine every product or organization that you interact with as a customer, you're generally not dealing directly with the product team. You're dealing with the service arm of that organization, so professional services. And that's really important because these are the people that are giving you consulting advice, they're showing you best practices, they're giving you support, they're helping you onboard and implement the product and use the product in the best way. So it's a really important thing, and you should think about how you provide professional services for your internal platform as well. And I spoke before about training as being a great example of that. The challenge, though, is that providing professional services requires a set of skills that are not generally present in engineering teams. So you're talking about product management, service levels, writing documentation, a lot of these things that are not natural in engineering teams. So you have to think about how do you bring either those skills in or how do you grow those skills. So for example, we've just hired a full-time document writer. We know that writing great documents is a lead indicator of a platform getting adopted. So we want to do a really good job of writing documents internally. We're also putting a lot of effort into internal training. We know that when we train people on something, we get a huge tailwind of adoption. So that's another way to encourage use of our platform. So that's my fifth tip, which is to really think about the professional services because they're as important as the product itself. Without great professional services supporting your platform, you're not really going to get the adoption. And if you don't have the adoption, you're not going to get the outcome. So just to wrap up, I thought I'd give you just a quick example of how this all plays out in practice. About a year ago, we had a team who wanted to build a new set of applications for our customers. They did their inception and did all the requirements analysis and figured out that they need to do authentication. So as a user, I want to log in so I can use the product. So they said, well, surely we're not the first people to hit a need for authentication. So there must be something out there that already does this for us. So they surveyed the organisation, and I'm ashamed to say we had 35 different ways to authenticate people. And I see some smiles in the room, so I feel like some of you might have a similar problem. So at this point, they had a choice. There's 35 ways that we're doing this. So none of those ways are great. When you've got 35 ways to authenticate people, you can imagine that none of those are best practice. So the choices were, number one, they could either adopt one of those 35 ways, and it would come with limitations. They could invent a 36th way, and that would kind of compound the problem, make the problem even worse. Or they could try and deliver a platform outcome as part of their project, but really that wasn't their primary reason for existence. That wasn't going to be part of their core mission. So none of those choices are really a great choice for that team. So they put their hand up and said, well, actually, we think this is something that should be solved globally for all of REA. We think this should be part of the Colab brand. It should be part of the platform. So we have an internal process where we assess these opportunities. It's called the Colab panel, where we look at opportunities that are coming down the platform, for the platform, and then we assess whether they're viable or not, and if they are, we kind of fund them. So these are the criteria that I showed before. So for authentication, there's a definite immediate benefit. There's a team that needs it right now. And by the way, there's a bunch of other teams that have got 35 broken ways to authenticate people. It's a well understood problem. I think authentication is not going to go away. We're going to need it now. We're going to need it forever. Not something that's experimental in any way. And we've got lots of experience in doing it already. It is a generic building block because every app we build is going to need something like this. It does take a considerable amount of effort to build. So authentication, if you've built on an identity project before, it's one of those things that seems very simple on the surface and very quickly becomes very, very complicated. And it can be thought about and reasoned independently. There are standard protocols out there for authentication, OAuth, and those things which help. But in this particular case, we didn't have the conditions in place to be able to deliver a platform outcome. So we didn't have a product manager, a team, or any resources. So that was the job for us to do. So what we did is we defined a very clear vision for what the product would be and what the benefits of that product would be. We created the product icon, so that we named the product. The name of the product is called Lock. There's a nice icon for it that really represents what the product is. We appointed a product manager. So this is somebody that's quite a technical person. It's a very technical domain with some product skills. We gave him a team to execute on it. And said, go for it. Your job is to solve this problem, not as part of another job, that's your primary job. And I've got in there some of the OKRs as well. So the way we measured the success of the team is, they're essentially customer metrics. They're how many people have you got onboarded onto your platform, and are the people that you have onboarded, are they happy or not with the product? So customer satisfaction. And the results have been amazing. So we've got, in just 6 months, we built an MVP. We built a team and built an MVP. We've got 4 different applications already running in production that are using this thing, so we're already getting the leverage outcome. We've got another 9 or so planned for the next quarter, including our core website with most of our users, realestate.com. We delivered a massive cost saving, right? So every time this thing gets adopted, there's a team that's not having to solve this problem from first principles. We have massive security advantages as well. Having a common security approach delivers a better security outcome, and then we can evolve that independently and improve security in lockstep, which is really important. It's also got a huge uplift for our consumer and customer teams as well, because now we have a place where we can encapsulate best practices around onboarding users, pulling people into our platform for the first time. And we have the ability to see users and their behavior and their data across multiple brands, which again has got a business benefit. So just an amazing result. So that's it. Just to finish off, they're my 5 tips for a successful platform. So the core idea here is to think about your internal platform as a product. By using the word collab and creating a brand, we were able to have the right conversation with the organisation across all levels, engineering, product, and even the executive level. And as a result of that, we're getting lots of traction and support, making lots of good progress. And we even have engineering teams excited about some new skills. So skills around customer service and service design. And most importantly, we were able to achieve all this without undermining the autonomy that we value really highly. We still think autonomy is one of the cultural traits that have made us really successful. So thank you, that's my story. Thanks for listening.